Welcome to the family. If you enjoy powerful stories and wild adventures, subscribe now, hit like and share with someone who will love it too. The emergency beacon cut through the void of space like a desperate scream, its alien frequency barely registering on the Wanderer's aging communication array. Captain Jake Morrison paused mid-sip of his coffee, the bitter liquid forgotten as the ship's AI translated the distress signal. "Captain, we're receiving an automated distress call from coordinates 127.4 by 89.2, announced Luna, the ship's navigation officer. Her fingers danced across the holographic interface, bringing up a three-dimensional star map that bathed the bridge in blue light. "It's unusual, sir. The signal is coming from a vessel I don't recognize in our databases." Jake set down his mug and leaned forward in his captain's chair. The Wanderer was a salvage vessel, part of humanity's expanding fleet that combed the outer rim territories for valuable resources and technology. First contact situations were rare, but not unheard of, though they usually didn't end well for the aliens involved. "What kind of unusual?" Jake asked, his weathered face creased with concern. At 52, he'd seen enough of the galaxy to know that unusual often meant dangerous. "The ship appears to be of Keth design, but it's broadcasting on a frequency that suggests the pilot is in immediate medical distress," Luna replied, her young face pale in the starlight streaming through the viewports. "Sir, if we don't respond, whoever's on that ship might die." Jake's second-in-command, Marcus Webb, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Captain, you know the regulations. First contact with unknown species requires approval from Central Command. We could be looking at a court-martial if we intervene without authorization." The distress signal continued its haunting wail, each pulse seeming more desperate than the last. Jake closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. He'd joined the salvage corps to escape the rigid military structure he'd served in for 20 years. But some protocols were written in blood, and for good reason. "How long to get Central Command approval?" he asked. "At least 6 hours for a response, sir," Marcus replied. "Maybe longer if they need to consult the xenobiology department." Damn. Jake stood and paced to the main viewport, staring out at the field of debris that had once been a massive space station. The Wanderer had been picking through the wreckage for 3 days, salvaging anything of value. Now, somewhere in the darkness beyond, an alien being was fighting for their life. "Luna, can you get a visual on the vessel?" "Attempting to establish visual contact now, sir." Luna's fingers flew over her controls, and the main screen flickered to life. The image was grainy and distorted, but unmistakably showed a sleek, organic-looking craft that seemed to pulse with bioluminescent patterns along its hull. "It's beautiful," whispered Tom Chen, the ship's engineer, his voice filled with wonder. "I've never seen anything like it." Jake studied the alien vessel, noting the scorch marks along its side and the way it listed slightly to port. Whatever had happened, the ship was badly damaged. As he watched, the bioluminescent patterns flickered and dimmed, like a heartbeat growing weaker. "Captain," Luna's voice was urgent now, "I'm detecting massive power fluctuations in their life support systems. Whoever's on that ship has maybe an hour before total system failure." The bridge fell silent, except for the steady hum of the Wanderer's engines and the persistent alien distress call. Jake felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a familiar burden. He thought of his daughter back on Earth, of the promise he'd made to her mother to always do the right thing, even when it was hard. "Marcus, log an official entry that we're responding to a humanitarian crisis under Emergency Protocol 7, Jake said finally, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the decision. "Luna, plot an intercept course. Tom, prepare the medical. Pay and get our translation matrix online. Sir, are you sure about this?" Marcus asked, though he was already moving to comply with the orders. Jake watched the dying alien ship grow larger on the screen and made a choice that would change everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the galaxy. Sometimes, Marcus, being human means taking the risk. The alien vessel was even more magnificent up close. As the Wanderer approached, Jake could see that what he'd initially taken for bioluminescence was actually a complex network of energy conduits running beneath a translucent hull material. The ship seemed almost alive, its surface rippling with patterns that reminded him of deep-sea creatures from Earth's oceans. Docking sequence initiated, announced Luna, her voice tight with concentration. Their ship's not responding to our standard docking protocols, but I think I can match their airlock manually. Tom's voice crackled over the intercom from the engine room. Captain, their power signature is unlike anything in our databases. It's not fusion, not antimatter. It's something completely different. Whatever's keeping that ship running, it's failing fast. Jake strapped on his emergency EVA suit, checking the seals and power levels with practiced efficiency. Marcus, you have the bridge. If anything goes wrong, you get us out of here immediately. That's an order. Understood, sir. But Captain, Marcus hesitated, then pressed on. We don't know what we're dealing with here. This could be a trap, or worse, some kind of quarantine situation. Noted, Jake replied, sealing his helmet. Luna, Tom, you're with me. Full hazmat. Protocols. The trio made their way through the Wanderer's cramped corridors to the emergency airlock. Jake had performed hundreds of salvage operations, but this felt different. The weight of potential first contact hung heavy in the recycled air of his suit. Seal integrity confirmed, Luna reported as they cycled through the airlock. Atmosphere on the alien vessel is, well, it's breathable, but with a higher oxygen content than Earth normal. Temperature is elevated, about 38 degrees Celsius. The alien airlock opened with a soft hiss, revealing a corridor that seemed to be grown rather than built. The walls curved organically, and a soft, pearl-like luminescence emanated. From the ceiling, the air carried a sweet floral scent that reminded Jake of his grandmother's garden. Stay alert, he whispered into his comm, though he couldn't shake the feeling that this place was more beautiful than threatening. They moved deeper into the ship, following the strongest life sign readings on their scanners. The corridors branched and curved in patterns that hurt to look at directly, as if the ship's architecture followed principles that human minds weren't quite equipped to understand. Contact, Tom whispered, raising his hand. Around the next bend, they could hear it, a voice definitely alien, speaking in rapid melodic tones that the universal translator was struggling to process. Jake peered around the corner and froze. The alien was unlike anything in humanity's xenological databases. She, and Jake was certain it was a she, stood about 6 feet tall with skin that shimmered like oil on water. Her limbs were elongated and graceful, and instead of hair, delicate. Tendrils moved around her head like they were floating in water. But it was her eyes that caught Jake's attention, large, expressive, and filled with unmistakable pain and fear. She was trapped, some kind of mechanical device, clearly not part of the ship's original design, had clamped around her torso. Sparks flew from damaged circuitry, and Jake could see that the device was slowly constricting. The alien woman's breathing was labored, and her skin had taken on a pale, translucent quality that suggested severe distress. "Help," she gasped in, heavily accented but recognizable English, her large eyes fixing on Jake. "Please, take off." Jake stepped into view, hands raised peacefully. The universal translator finally kicked in, filling in the gaps. "It's some kind of restraint device," he said to his team. "Looks like it malfunctioned during whatever damaged their ship." Tom was already scanning the device with his engineering tools. "Captain, this is bad. The mechanism is designed to respond to stress by tightening further. If we try to force it off, we could seriously injure her." The alien woman's breathing became more ragged, and the device tightened another notch. Her pain was evident, and Jake felt something twist in his chest. This was someone's daughter, someone's loved one, and she was dying while they stood here analyzing the situation. "Mum," Jake said gently, kneeling down to her level. "My name is Jake. We're here to help. Can you tell me about this device? How does it work?" Her eyes widened at his calm tone, and some of the panic left her features. "Biolock," she managed. "Punishment device. Responds to fear, stress, more afraid. Tighter it gets." Jake nodded grimly. He'd seen similar devices, used by slavers in the Outer Rim, designed to keep captives compliant through pain and terror. The fact that this woman was wearing one raised disturbing questions about her situation. "Okay," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "We're going to get you out of this, but I need you to stay calm. The calmer you are, The looser it gets, right? She nodded weakly, and Jake could see the device relax slightly as her breathing slowed. Luna, get our medical scanner on her. Tom, see if you can interface with that thing's control system. And someone get Marcus on the comm. We're going to need the medical bay prepped for alien physiology. As his team went to work, Jake kept talking to the alien woman, his voice low and soothing. "What's your name?" "Kira," she whispered, and despite everything, she managed a small smile. The next 30 minutes tested every skill Jake had learned in 2 decades of military and salvage operations. While Tom worked frantically to decode the biolock's alien technology, Jake focused on keeping Kira calm and conscious. Her condition was deteriorating rapidly. The device had been slowly crushing her respiratory system for hours. "Talk to me, Kira," Jake said softly, maintaining eye contact through his helmet's visor. "Tell me about your ship, it's beautiful." Kira's large eyes focused on him with visible effort. Not mine," she gasped. "Stolen. Was running from them." "Who were you running from?" "Collectors," she whispered, the word carrying a weight of terror that made Jake's blood run cold. "They take people, sell them. I was cargo." The implications hit Jake like a physical blow. This wasn't just a first contact situation. It was a rescue from what amounted to alien human traffickers. The biolock wasn't a restraint device. It was a torture mechanism designed to break the will of sentient beings. "Captain," Tom's voice was tight with concentration, "I've got good news and bad news. The good news is I can probably bypass the biolock's primary systems. The bad news is that doing so will trigger a pain response before it releases. It's going to hurt her badly for about 10 seconds. Kira had been listening, and she nodded weakly. "Do it. Please. Rather pain than death." Jake squeezed her hand gently, surprised by how similar it felt to a human hand, despite the slight webbing between the fingers. "You're incredibly brave, Kira. We're going to get through this together." Luna looked up from her medical scanner, her face pale. "Captain, her life signs are critical. Heart rate equivalent is erratic, and her oxygen levels are dropping fast. If we don't do this now..." "Do it, Tom." Tom's hands flew over his portable interface, connecting it to the biolock's control systems. "Initiating bypass in 3 as 2, 1. The device suddenly blazed with red light, and Kira's back arched as pain shot through her body. Her scream was unlike anything Jake had ever heard, not quite human, but carrying the universal language of agony. Then, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only seconds, the biolock split apart with a metallic crack and fell away. Kira collapsed forward, and Jake caught her, surprised by how light she felt, despite her height. Her skin was warm and had a texture like wet silk. She was breathing hard but breathing freely for the first time in hours. "It's okay," Jake murmured, supporting her weight. "You're safe now. You're safe." "Thank you," she whispered against his shoulder, and he could feel her trembling with relief and exhaustion. "Thought I would die alone." Luna was running medical scans as fast as her equipment would allow. "She needs immediate medical attention, Captain. Some kind of respiratory distress, plus what looks like severe dehydration and malnutrition." "Can we move her?" Jake asked. Carefully, very carefully. They made the journey back to the Wanderer slowly, with Jake supporting most of Kira's weight. She was conscious but weak, and Jake found himself talking to her constantly, partly to keep her alert and partly because her presence had awakened something protective in him that he hadn't felt since his daughter was small. "Your ship," Kira said as they entered the Wanderer's medical bay. "It feels different, safer." "Different how?" Jake asked, helping her onto the medical bed. "Not angry. The collector ships, they felt angry all the time. Violence in the walls." She looked around the small but well-equipped medical bay with wonder. "This feels kind." Luna began hooking up monitoring equipment, while Tom ran diagnostics on the biolock fragments they'd brought back. Jake found himself studying Kira's face, noting the intelligence in her large eyes and the way she observed everything with careful attention, despite her exhaustion. "Captain," Marcus's voice came over the intercom. "Central Command is requesting an immediate status report. They're not happy about our deviation from protocol." Jake sighed. He'd known this was coming. "Tell them we'll file a full report. Within the hour. Medical emergency takes priority. Sir, they're threatening to recall us immediately and launch a full investigation." Jake looked at Kira, who was watching the conversation with growing alarm despite not understanding all the words. Her hand found his, gripping it with surprising strength. "Don't let them take me back," she whispered. "Please. They'll find me. Again." The weight of the moment settled on Jake's shoulders. He was facing a choice between his career, his crew's future, and doing what he knew was right. The regulations were clear. Unauthorized first contact was a serious violation, but looking at Kira, seeing the trust in her eyes and the fear of being abandoned again, the choice became surprisingly simple. "Marcus," Jake said into the comm, his voice carrying the authority he'd learned commanding troops in humanity's border conflicts, "tell Central Command that we're dealing with a humanitarian crisis involving what appears to be organized alien trafficking. We're not moving until our passenger is stable and safe. Sir, they're not going to like that. Then they can court-martial me when we get back," Jake replied. "Some things are more important than regulations." Kira squeezed his hand tighter, and for the first time since they'd found her, she smiled. A real smile that transformed her entire face and made Jake realize that maybe, just maybe, they were about to change the course of human-alien relations. Forever. Over the next 48 hours, the Wanderer became something none of them had expected, a sanctuary. Kira's physical recovery progressed remarkably quickly, her alien physiology responding well to the ship's medical facilities once. Luna had figured out the proper atmospheric mix and nutritional requirements, but it was her emotional healing that surprised Jake the most. "Your species," Kira said, sitting up in the medical bed while Luna ran her daily health scans. "You help strangers without thought of gain?" Jake, who had taken it upon himself to check on her every few hours, considered the question. "Not all of us, but when we see someone in need, yeah, most humans try to help. It's just who we are." Kira's head tendrils, which Jake had learned were called centaur, and served as both sensory organs and emotional indicators, moved in patterns that he was beginning to recognize as curiosity mixed with amazement. "The collectors spoke of humans, called you violent primitives, said you fought constantly, destroyed your own world." "We have our problems," Jake admitted, settling into the chair beside her bed. "We've fought wars, made mistakes, but we've also learned from them, most of us anyway. Yet you risk your careers, your freedom to save one stranger." Tom looked up from the engineering station, where he was analyzing the biolock fragments. "Captain's right, though, it's just what you do. My grandmother used to say that how you treat strangers says everything about who you really are." Kira's large eyes studied each of them in turn. "I have traveled to 17 worlds since the collectors took me, seen 12 different species. None would have risked themselves for someone like me." "Someone like you?" Luna asked, not looking up from her medical readouts. "Keth are considered expendable. We have no great military, no valuable resources. Other species see us as weak." Kira's centaur drooped with what Jake had learned was sadness. "Even my own people, they would not have come for me. Too dangerous." Jake felt anger flare in his chest. "You're not expendable. No one is." The simple statement seemed to hit Kira with unexpected force. Her centaur went completely still, and her eyes widened. You truly believe that?" "Of course I do. But I am nothing to you. A stranger from a species you had never met." "Doesn't matter," Jake said firmly. "You were in pain, in danger. That's all that mattered." Kira stared at him for a long moment, then did something that made everyone on the ship stop what they were doing. She began to sing, a low melodic sound that seemed to resonate through the ship's hull itself. The song was wordless but carried such beauty and emotion that Jake felt tears prick his eyes. "What is that?" Luna whispered. "Gratitude song," Kira said when she finished, her voice thick with emotion. "Among my people, it is sung only for those who save your life at risk to their own. I have never had reason to sing it before." The moment was interrupted by Marcus's voice over the intercom. "Captain, we've got company. 3 ships just dropped out of hyperspace and they're hailing us on all frequencies." Jake's blood ran cold. "Collectors?" Kira's centaur went rigid with terror. "They found me." Jake stood immediately, his mind racing. "Marcus, what's their configuration?" 2 medium-class vessels and 1 large ship." The large one matches the signature of known slaver vessels from the outer rim. Captain, they're demanding we surrender our stolen property immediately. Kira was struggling to get out of bed, panic overwhelming her. They will take me back. Will punish me for escaping. Will hurt all of you for helping. Like hell they will, Jake said grimly. Luna, can Kira be moved? She's stable enough, but get her to the bridge. I want her to see this. Jake's voice carried a steel that his crew had rarely heard before. Marcus, battle stations. Tom, I need everything you've learned about that bio-lock technology. We're about to show these collectors what happens when they threaten someone under human protection. As they made their way to the bridge, Kira leaning heavily on Jake for support, she whispered, "You cannot fight them. Your ship is a salvage vessel. They have weapons, soldiers." Kira, Jake said, helping her into a seat at the navigation station, "You're about to learn something important about humans. We might not be the biggest or the strongest species in the galaxy, but we're definitely the most stubborn. And when we decide to protect someone..." He smiled grimly as the main screen showed the approaching alien vessels. "Well, let's just say we don't back down." The lead collector ship was hailing them again, the translated voice cold and mechanical. "Human vessel, you are harboring stolen property. Surrender the Keth female immediately, or face the consequences." Jake settled into his captain's chair and activated the communications array. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of every human who had ever stood between the innocent and those who would harm them. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the independent vessel Wanderer. The being you call property is under the protection of the human race. She is free, she is safe, and she's not going anywhere with you. I suggest you turn around and go find someone else to bully." The response was immediate and predictable. "You have 60 seconds to comply or we will take her by force." Jake looked at his crew. Luna, pale but determined. Marcus, checking weapon systems they'd never expected to use. Tom, uploading something into the ship's computer systems with grim focus. Then he looked at Kira, whose centaur were moving in patterns he'd never seen before. "What are they doing?" he asked her. "They are..." "Amazed," she whispered. "No one has ever stood up to the collectors before, not for a Keth, not for anyone." Jake activated the ship-wide intercom. "All hands, this is the captain. We've got some unwelcome visitors who think they can take our passenger by force. I want everyone to remember that we took an oath to protect those who can't protect themselves. Today, we prove that oath means something." He switched back to the external communications. "Collector vessels, this is your final warning. Leave now or find out why humanity earned its reputation the hard way." The silence that followed was broken by Tom's voice, tight with excitement. "Captain, that bio-lock technology, I figured out how to reverse it. If they've got other prisoners on those ships..." Jake's grin was predatory. "Can you broadcast it to their vessels? Give me 30 seconds. Jake opened the channel one more time. "Collector vessels, you have a choice. Leave peacefully or stick around and see what happens when humans get creative." The tension on the bridge was palpable as Tom's fingers flew over his console, uploading the bio-lock reversal program into the Wanderer's communication array. Jake watched the 3 collector ships maintain their threatening formation, knowing that in a straight fight, his salvage vessel wouldn't last 5 minutes against their weapons. "Upload complete," Tom announced. "If they've got biolocks on those ships, this should disable them all simultaneously." "How sure are you that it'll work?" Marcus asked, sweat beading on his forehead as he monitored the approaching vessels. "About 70%, Tom replied. "The technology is consistent, but each ship might have variations." Jake nodded grimly. 70% odds were better than he'd expected. "Kira, I need to know, how many prisoners are typically on a collector ship that size?" Kira's centaur were trembling as she studied the display. "The large vessel, perhaps 50 beings, maybe more, different species, all taken from their homes." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Some have been there for years." The weight of that revelation settled over the bridge crew. They weren't just protecting Kira anymore. They were potentially liberating dozens of sentient beings from slavery. "Captain," Luna said quietly, "even if we disable their biolocks, those prisoners will still be trapped on hostile ships." "One problem at a time," Jake replied. The lead collector ship was hailing them again. "Human vessel, your time is expired. Prepare to be boarded. Jake activated the communications array, his voice steady despite the racing of his heart. Actually, I have a counter-proposal. You see, my engineer here has been studying the biolock technology you're so fond of. Fascinating stuff, especially the part where the entire system can be remotely disabled. There was a pause in the transmission. Then the mechanical voice returned with less certainty. You are bluffing. Such technology requires direct access to control systems. Tom, Jake said casually, would you like to demonstrate? Tom's hand hovered over the transmission key. Broadcasting reversal signal now. The effect was immediate and dramatic. On the main screen they could see lights flickering across the hulls of all three collector ships. Emergency klaxons began wailing over their open communication channels, and the mechanical voice returned, now carrying clear panic. What have you done? Freed your prisoners, Jake replied simply. Every biolock on your ships is now permanently disabled. Your cargo is no longer under your control. Kira gasped, her hand covering her mouth in amazement. It worked. I can hear them. The others, they are free of the locks? Jake looked at her sharply. You can hear them. Keth have connection to others in distress. They are afraid but hopeful. The collector ships were in chaos now. Their formation broke apart as internal emergencies demanded attention. Over the communication channels, they could hear shouts in various alien languages, the sound of running footsteps, and what might have been fighting. The prisoners, Kira said, her eyes wide with wonder. They are fighting back without the biolocks to control them. They are overpowering their captors. Marcus looked up from his tactical display, grinning. 2 of the collector ships are showing massive internal power fluctuations. Looks like they're having some serious problems, but the largest ship was still approaching, and its captain was clearly not ready to give up. Human vessel, you have interfered with legitimate commerce. We demand compensation for our lost property. Jake's expression hardened. The only property I see here are the chains you put on innocent people, and the only compensation you're getting. Here's a lesson in why slavery is a bad idea. You cannot protect them all, human. Even if they overcome us today, there are other collectors, other ships. The weak will always be prey to the strong. It was Kira who spoke up, her voice carrying across the bridge communications. You are wrong, Collector. The weak are not alone anymore. She stood, still weak but determined, and moved to Jake's side. Captain Morrison, with your permission, I would like to send a message to my people, and to others who have suffered under the collectors. Jake nodded, and Kira activated the ship's wideband communication array. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong, carrying the musical quality of her species but with steel underneath. My name is Kira of the Keth. I was taken by the collectors, held prisoner, tortured by their devices. I thought I would die, alone and forgotten. But I was found by humans, beings who had never seen my species before, who had no obligation to help, who risked everything to save a stranger. They showed me that there is something stronger than the cruelty of the collectors. There is kindness, there is courage, there is hope. She paused, and Jake could see tears, or their alien equivalent, in her large eyes. To all who hear this message, you are not alone. There are those who will stand against the darkness, who will fight for the innocent, who will never abandon those in need. The humans have shown us a new way. Perhaps it is time we all learned from their example. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Communication channels lit up with voices from across the sector, some human but many alien, all speaking in languages the universal translator struggled to keep up with. Messages of support, offers of aid, promises to stand together against slavers and oppressors. On the main screen, the lead collector ship was turning away, its captain apparently deciding that discretion was the better part of valor when faced with what was rapidly becoming a coordinated resistance movement. "This is not over, human," came the final transmission. "You have made a powerful enemy today." Jake stood and walked to the main view screen, watching the alien ships retreat into hyperspace. "No," he said quietly. "We've made something much more important. We've made friends." As the immediate danger passed, Jake realized that they had just witnessed and helped create something unprecedented in galactic history. The birth of an alliance based not on mutual benefit or shared enemies, but on the simple principle that all sentient beings deserved freedom and dignity. 3 days after the confrontation with the Collectors, the Wanderer had become the unlikely center of a growing movement. Ships began arriving from across the sector, some human but increasingly alien vessels of species Jake had never encountered. They came bearing rescued prisoners, intelligence about Collector operations, and most importantly, a shared determination to end the slave trade that had plagued the galaxy for centuries. Kira had insisted on helping coordinate the rescue efforts. Despite her recent ordeal, her knowledge of Collector operations proving invaluable. Jake watched her work with a mixture of admiration and concern. She pushed herself hard, as if trying to make up for all the time she'd been powerless. "The Voss delegation just confirmed," she reported, looking up from the communication station they'd set up in the Wanderer's small conference room. "They're contributing 12 patrol ships to monitor the Kepler trade routes. That brings our allied fleet to 87 vessels." Jake shook his head in amazement. A week ago, he'd been a simple salvage captain worried about court-martial. Now he was somehow helping coordinate what the various species were calling the Free Alliance, an unprecedented coalition of races united by humanity's simple belief that slavery was wrong. "Any word from Central Command?" Marcus asked. The crew had been waiting for the other shoe to drop regarding their violation of first contact protocols. "Actually, yes," Jake replied, reading from his personal communicator. "Admiral Chen wants to speak with me personally. The message is interesting." He activated the secured communication channel, and the holographic image of Admiral Chen appeared in the center of the room. The elderly woman's expression was unreadable, but Jake had served under her before and knew that look meant complex political calculations were happening. "Captain Morrison," she began without preamble, "in 35 years of service I have never seen a single decision have such far-reaching consequences. As of this morning, representatives from 43 alien species have contacted Central Command requesting formal diplomatic relations with humanity. The President is calling it the most significant development in human history since faster-than-light travel." Jake felt his stomach drop. "Admiral, I can explain—" "Captain—" "Admiral," Chen interrupted, "let me ask you something. When you made the choice to rescue that alien woman, what were you thinking?" Jake glanced at Kira, who was listening intently, despite not understanding all the military terminology. "I was thinking that someone was dying, and we had the power to help. Everything else seemed irrelevant." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. "That answer, Captain, is why the President has asked me to offer you a new position. The alien species we are now in contact with have specifically requested that you serve as humanity's first ambassador of humanitarian affairs, essentially our representative for issues involving the protection of sentient rights across the galaxy." The room went silent. Jake stared at the hologram, certain he'd misheard. "Admiral, I'm a salvage operator. I'm not qualified for diplomatic work." "On the contrary," Admiral Chen replied. "According to our new alien allies, you're the most qualified human in the galaxy. They trust you, Captain, because you proved that humans will do the right thing even when it's difficult. That's apparently rarer in galactic politics than we thought." Kira stepped forward, her centaur moving in patterns Jake had learned indicated excitement. "Captain Morrison, may I speak?" Admiral Chen raised an eyebrow at the tall, graceful alien, and Jake made quick introductions. Kira inclined her head respectfully before speaking. "Admiral Chen, I have spoken with representatives of many species in the past days. All tell the same story. For generations, the strong have preyed upon the weak, and the galaxy has accepted this as natural order. Then humans arrived and everything changed, not because you are stronger or more advanced, but because you believe that strength should protect the innocent rather than exploit them." The Admiral listened intently as Kira continued. "Your Captain Morrison did not save me because his government ordered it, or because it benefited humanity. He saved me because it was right. This is why we trust humans. This is why we wish to learn from you." Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Captain, the choice is yours. You can return to Earth and accept this new position. helping establish formal diplomatic relations with our new allies. Or you can continue your current mission, though I suspect salvage operation is no longer an accurate description of what you're doing. Jake looked around the room at his crew, at the communications displays showing dozens of Allied ships, at Kira, whose rescue had started this entire chain of events. The weight of the decision seemed enormous, but somehow the choice was clear. Admiral, with respect, I think I'm needed out here. At least for now, there are still collectors out there, still people who need help. Maybe the best diplomacy we can do is to keep showing the galaxy what humanity stands for. Admiral Chen smiled, the first time Jake had seen her do so in years of service. I thought you might say that. Very well, Captain. Consider your commission extended indefinitely. Your ship is now officially designated as the humanitarian vessel Wanderer, with full authority to conduct rescue and relief operations anywhere in human space or Allied territories. She paused, her expression growing more serious. But Captain, understand what you're taking on. The collectors were just the beginning. There are worse things out there. Species that see kindness as weakness. Governments that rule through fear and oppression. You're going to make enemies. We already have, Jake replied, thinking of the collector captain's parting threat. But we've also made friends. More than I ever imagined possible. Indeed you have. Godspeed, Captain. And Captain? Admiral Chen's image began to flicker as the transmission ended. Make us proud out there. As the hologram faded, Jake found himself looking at a room full of faces, human and alien, all watching him with expressions of hope and determination. Outside, dozens of ships from across the galaxy waited for his word, ready to stand against the darkness that had plagued the galaxy for too long. Well, Jake said finally, breaking the silence, I guess we have work to do. Kira moved to stand beside him, her centaur glowing with what he'd learned was contentment mixed with determination. Captain, there is something else. The rescued prisoners from the collector ships. Many have asked to join our mission. They wish to help free others as they were freed. Jake nodded, unsurprised. He'd seen it before in military operations. Those who had been saved often became the most dedicated to saving others. We'll need to expand our operations then. Luna, start working on logistics for a larger fleet. Marcus, I want you to coordinate with the alien ship captains. We need to establish communication protocols and operational procedures. Sir, Tom spoke up from his engineering station, I've been analyzing the technology we've recovered from various sources. Some of these alien ships have capabilities that could revolutionize our rescue operations. If we can integrate their systems with our own, do it, Jake said immediately. Whatever resources you need. Over the next several hours, the Wanderer transformed from a simple salvage vessel into the command center of an unprecedented galactic alliance. Jake found himself in constant communication with ship captains from species he'd never heard of, all united by a common purpose that transcended traditional political boundaries. It was late in the ship's night cycle when Jake finally found a moment alone with Kira. She was standing in the observation lounge, watching the fleet of Allied ships that now surrounded them, their various hull designs and lighting creating a beautiful, diverse constellation against the stars. Regrets? Jake asked, settling into the chair beside her. Kira's centaur moved in what he'd learned was amusement. About being rescued by humans, never. About the consequences. Sometimes I wonder if we have started something too large to control. Jake considered that. Maybe, but sometimes the right thing isn't the easy thing, and sometimes change only happens when someone is willing to take a risk. Your species, Kira said thoughtfully, you are younger than most in the galaxy, yet you seem to understand things that older civilizations have forgotten. Like what? That strength without compassion becomes tyranny, that freedom is not something to be hoarded but shared. That sometimes the most important victories are won not by defeating enemies, but by making friends. Jake smiled, watching a group of mixed human and alien engineers working together on some complex technical problem visible through the viewports of a nearby ship. We've had a lot of practice at learning from our mistakes. Maybe that's made us better at recognizing what really matters. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Jake activated his communicator, to find a holographic display showing a sector map with dozens of red markers. "Captain," came Luna's voice over the intercom, "we're receiving distress signals from multiple systems. Looks like the collectors are retaliating. They're hitting refugee camps and undefended colonies across the sector." Jake stood immediately, the weight of command settling on his shoulders once again. "All ships, this is Captain Morrison. We have multiple humanitarian crises developing. Prepare for immediate deployment." As the Allied fleet began to move, Jake realized that their actions had indeed started something larger than any of them had imagined. But looking at Kira, at his crew, at the dozens of species now working together for a common cause, he knew they had also started something beautiful. The TIE Galaxy was about to learn that humans didn't just fight for themselves, they fought for anyone who needed protection. And they were no longer fighting alone. 6 months after the rescue of Kira, the Wanderer had become the flagship of what the galactic media now called the Liberation Fleet. The small salvage vessel had been extensively modified with alien technology, transformed into a mobile command center capable of coordinating humanitarian operations across multiple star systems simultaneously. Jake stood on the bridge, now expanded to accommodate mixed human and alien crews, watching the tactical display that showed their latest operation. The Collector stronghold on Gamma Persei III had been one of the largest slave processing centers in the galaxy, and its liberation had taken 3 weeks of careful planning and coordination between 17 different species. "Final transport away," reported Commander Vex, an insectoid being whose species had joined the Alliance after their own homeworld was freed from Collector occupation. "All prisoners are safely aboard the hospital ships." "Casualty report," Jake asked. "Minimal," replied Dr. Luna, who now served as the fleet's chief medical coordinator. 12 injured, none critically. "The biolock reversal technology has made these operations so much safer for the prisoners." Jake nodded, but his expression remained serious. "And the collectors themselves?" 47 captured. The rest fled when they realized resistance was futile, Marcus reported from his expanded tactical station. "The captured ones are already requesting to provide intelligence on other collector operations in exchange for clemency." It had become a pattern. The collector organization, built on fear and the exploitation of the weak, crumbled quickly when faced with organized, determined resistance. Their entire power structure depended on their victims being isolated and helpless. When that changed, everything changed. "Captain," Kira's voice came from the communication station, "I'm receiving reports from the other task forces. The operations at Vega Minor and Proxima Station were also successful. That's 18 facilities liberated this month." Jake allowed himself a small smile. Kira had insisted on remaining with the fleet rather than returning to her homeworld, becoming his chief liaison with the various alien species that had joined their cause. Her unique ability to sense the emotional states of other beings had proven invaluable in both rescue operations and diplomatic negotiations. "Sir," Tom called from the engineering section, "we're getting something unusual on the long-range sensors. Large ship, unknown configuration approaching at high speed." The bridge fell silent. After months of successful operations, they'd grown perhaps too comfortable with their string of victories. Jake reminded himself that the galaxy was full of unknowns, and not all of them were friendly. "Red alert," he ordered. "All ships, defensive positions." The unknown vessel dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of their sensor range, and Jake's breath caught. It was massive, easily 3 times the size of the largest ship in their fleet, and its design was unlike anything in their databases. The hull seemed to be made of some kind of crystalline material that refracted starlight into rainbow patterns. "They're hailing us," Luna reported, her voice tight with nervousness. On screen, the being that appeared on the main display was unlike any they had encountered. Tall and ethereal, with features that seemed to shift and flow like liquid light. It radiated an aura of ancient wisdom and power that made everyone on the bridge unconsciously straighten. "I am High Counselor Zara of the Eternal Assembly," the E being said, its voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate through the ship's hull itself. "I come seeking the humans who have dared to change the order of things." Jake stepped forward, acutely aware that he was still wearing his old salvage. operator's uniform despite his new responsibilities. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison. What can we do for you, Counselor?" The ancient being studied him with eyes that seemed to hold the light of distant stars. "For 10,000 years, the Eternal Assembly has maintained the balance of power in this galaxy. We have observed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, the ebb and flow of conquest and surrender. We have seen the strong dominate the weak, and we have considered this the natural order." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. This sounded like the prelude to a threat, and if this being represented a civilization that had lasted 10,000 years, the Liberation Fleet might be facing its greatest challenge yet. "But you," Counselor Zara continued, "you have done something unprecedented. You have taught the weak to become strong, not through conquest or domination, but through unity and compassion. You have created something new in the galaxy, an alliance based not on mutual benefit but on mutual care." The being paused, and Jake realized that what he'd taken for a threat might be something else entirely. "In our long existence, we have grown detached. We have watched suffering from afar, telling ourselves that intervention would disrupt the natural balance. But watching your fleet, seeing what can be accomplished when beings choose to care for one another rather than exploit each other, we have realized that we were wrong." Counselor Zara stepped closer to the display, and Jake could see something in those ancient eyes that looked remarkably like humility. "Captain Morrison, the Eternal Assembly wishes to formally request membership in your Liberation Fleet. We offer our knowledge, our technology, and our ships in service of the cause you have championed. We wish to learn from humanity how to be worthy of our power." The bridge erupted in whispered conversations as the full implications sank in. The most ancient and powerful civilization in the known galaxy wanted to join their humanitarian mission. Jake looked around at his crew, human and alien faces all showing the same mixture of amazement and determination, then back at the ancient being on the screen. "Counselor," he said finally, "we'd be honored to have you join us, but I want to be clear about what we're fighting for. This isn't about humans leading other species. It's about all of us working together to make sure that no one has to suffer. Alone, that the strong protect the weak instead of preying on them. That," Counselor Zara replied, "is precisely why we wish to follow your example." As the massive crystalline ship moved to join their formation, Jake felt the weight of what they had accomplished and what lay ahead. They had started with one simple rescue, one act of compassion for a stranger in need. Now they commanded a fleet that spanned species and star systems, united by the radical idea that all sentient beings deserved freedom and dignity. Kira moved to stand beside him, her centaur glowing with contentment and hope. "Captain, do you ever think about what would have happened if you had followed protocols that day? If you had waited for authorization before rescuing me?" Jake considered the question, looking out at the diverse fleet that surrounded them, thinking of the thousands of beings they had freed, the alliances they had forged, the future they were building together. "Sometimes," he said finally. "But then I remember something my daughter used to say when she was little. She said that heroes aren't people who never make mistakes. They're people who choose to do the right thing even when it's scary. And that choice," Kira said softly, "has changed the galaxy." Jake nodded, watching as ships from dozens of species worked together to coordinate their next mission. The liberation of an entire slave world that the collectors had operated for generations. It would be their largest and most dangerous operation, yet but looking at the force they had assembled, he felt confident they would succeed. More importantly, he knew that success would inspire others, that their example would continue to spread across the galaxy, that someday the idea of slavery and oppression would be as obsolete as humanity's old tribal conflicts. They had proven that the universe didn't have to be a cold, cruel place where the strong dominated the weak. They had shown that it could be something better, a place where different species could work together, where compassion was strength, where no one had to face the darkness alone. "All ships," Jake announced over the fleet communication system, "this is Captain Morrison. Prepare for hyperspace jump. We have people to save." As the Liberation Fleet engaged their drives and leaped toward their next mission, Jake allowed himself a moment of quiet pride. They had started with a simple rescue, but they had built something that would outlast them all, a new way of thinking about power and responsibility that would echo across the stars for generations to come. The galaxy would never be the same, and that, Jake thought as the stars streaked past, was exactly the point. The end.